Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this series of conversations, we've been looking at the experience of finding, accessing, analyzing, teaching, and learning with primary sources and archival material. Joining me is Dr. Rebecca Kreitz, a research fellow at the Center for the History of Medicine at the University of Warwick in the UK. Dr. Kreitz will be talking about how she has used archives and primary sources in her research and instruction. Also joining me is Felix Barnes, an editor at Adam Matthew Digital, which has launched a new platform called Research Methods Primary Sources, an online learning tool that helps students develop their primary source literacy. This four-part series is brought to you in part by Adam Matthew Digital. In this final episode of our series, my guests and I talk about the future of primary sources, ongoing digitization efforts, and the impact that's having on accessibility. So digitization is obviously an ongoing process for making primary source material more accessible. Are there any aspects of this process that are evolving specifically? And Felix, why don't we start with you on that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are digital tools that can be incredibly hard to understand, and people are doing all kinds of interesting things which look fiendishly difficult, and sometimes it feels like some historians are almost becoming programmers to deal with this quantity of data. And so obviously there are several digital tools which are emerging to help people deal with this material, and also the technologies which we're able to apply to the primary sources to open them up for this interrogation. So optical character recognition has been, around for quite some time. So that's obviously machines being able to read printed text. But the new technology which is emerging, which Adam Matthew have managed to apply to a lot of their collections, is handwritten text technology. Mm-hmm. So this is, you can do a keyword search and it will find the text in some manuscript pages. So if you can imagine what the OCR has done for quantitative data with printed material, that potential suddenly becomes realizable with vast amounts of manuscript material and whatever insights might be available there. So yeah, those are the things which really come to mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe might be worth mentioning platforms as well on which to publish this material. So one thing Adam Matthew is doing is making its publishing platform available. So other people, it's a platform called Cortex, and it's licensable. So people can publish their own collections, open access, with all that technology of the HTR, the OCR as well. So again, I think the platform it's worth mentioning is changing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay. And Becky, I'm curious to hear, present the same question to you as a researcher and user of a lot of this. What's making your job easier or expanding, I guess, opportunities for you in finding resources?
For me, it's just so much simpler and quicker to find source material and explore research avenues cheaply and effectively. And for me, I think this is just so important for overcoming the financial and mobility inequalities among researchers.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah. And then how would you say, and sticking with you, Becky, how would you say digitization is impacting broader digital literacy skills and research methods overall?
One of the things that I've found with students over the past few years when I've been teaching them is that they have this ever-present temptation of a keyword search where they can go into Google Scholar or into a particular resource collection and put in their keywords. That's fine, but it means that they're actually really subject to anachronism. The keywords that we think are so sensible now are perhaps not the ones that people used in the past. So often people, our new researchers who aren't aware of this problem, are surprised when they seem to find no data. There's loads, they just are looking for the wrong keywords, or an archivist perhaps hasn't linked that keyword to that that research material. There's also this problem of incorrect transcription. My favorite incorrect transcription I found on a digitized newspaper. It just appeared while I was looking for it. It was meant to say a man with a blue coat, but it was digitized and transcribed as a blue tart. And I thought, what on earth is happening here? I had to go and look at it more properly. So there is this problem of incorrect transcription, but it's getting better now.
Yeah, okay. And I think if I could add to that, there is this, sense that the technology is always right, and I think, as Becky points out well, sometimes it's not. And if I could add something actually to about the keywords, which is quite interesting. One of the people we interviewed for research methods was a historian called Nancy Unger. She had a really interesting example of that, actually. She was researching someone called Belle Lafollette, and she couldn't find her anywhere in these catalogues until she realized that, of course, people back in the early 20th century probably wouldn't have been known, or women wouldn't have been known by their first name. But then when she put in Mrs. Lafollette, hey presto, a load of stuff. So there's just something in our collection which speaks to what Becky was saying.
Mm.
Yeah, it's really important for especially our new researchers to be aware of the challenges of digital literacy. We've got to be able to consider the process of selection for digitization, the shortcomings, which are thankfully diminishing, of word recognition software, and the limitations of searchable metadata that reflect our constantly developing research interests, especially for non-written sources like pictures that require an archivist to predict a researcher's interests. But that said, it's now easier to share research results, and that can help us build those good professional relationships. And it's easier to engage with the source material of scholars as well. And this is really helping students to feel on a more equal footing with scholars, because they can engage with the scholarly conversation more deeply and consciously.
Mm-hmm. And then, Felix, I imagine this area is something Adam Matthew pays attention to quite closely. I mean, especially in producing something like research methods primary resources, in terms of the researchers' ability to have or improve their digital literacy skills.
Yeah, absolutely. That one thing that occurred to me is abundancy, actually, in dealing with abundancy, and how the digital kind of, I suppose, abundancy has always been a problem. We did a great interview with a historian about working in a German archive, and he comes in, there are thousands and thousands of these incredibly useful police reports, and how on earth you get through them, and that's in the physical. So the digital kind of magnifies this problem to some extent. So that's one issue, I suppose. In terms of digital literacy, is how you do with that. And the other, I suppose, interesting thing about digitization, and the other classic kind of problem with it, is the kind of the serendipitous find is, these search tools are becoming really effective, but almost too effective to some extent. So that's kind of how I guess those skills are being affected, is you have, to some extent, you have a less of a journey through an archive in digital form, so it's important to kind of know that, or at least you do if you're not a very dedicated and disciplined student of the stuff.
True. Yeah, Becky, I'm wondering how you might respond to that in terms of the abundancy and sort of serendipity, and how those are enhanced or with a digital platform or not.
I wish I had a solution for the problem of abundance, but I really don't. It is a challenge, and it's all the more important for us to approach our research process very consciously and with a self-awareness of what we're looking for and how we're going to look for it. And as Felix was saying, that sometimes there is that serendipity that can be not curtailed, but perhaps diminished slightly with our digitized sources. I found that students who exclusively use digital sources, sometimes they can struggle to place that source within its context. So alongside other sources from the collection that could explain why a source has survived or how people in the past engaged with it. Especially I'm thinking about newspapers here, where I've had students who've just focused completely onto one article and haven't looked at the articles that were around it, or the rest of the articles in the newspaper, or what that newspaper was about, and their political and social positions. And it means that they sometimes view them in artificial isolation, which can be a little problematic. But then again, this is why Adam Matthews always provides those links to the broader collections to just try and combat that slightly.
Excellent. Thank you. Becky and Felix, I'm wondering if a little compare and contrast exercise here and talk about the primary resource availability from when you were students and how and now, what are the biggest differences and how have they impacted the research process? And Felix, we'll jump back over to you.
Sure. Well, I was a student of history in the 2000s. And as far as I knew back then, digitization of source facsimiles wasn't really a thing. Or it certainly was nothing that I was aware of. In my seminars, our teachers used to come in with sheafs of photocopies of, well, this is audio, but I'm going that thick. It's about an inch or so of, and it was often transcript material rather than something an image of the original, and so and it's interesting what Becky was saying about access. But I was very lucky to be at a university which was what we call a legal deposit library. So the periodicals I needed for my dissertation were all available there. And the books I needed, the early 20th century books I needed were all available there. And then, I got even luckier because in the holidays, I happened to, my family lived near a city which was also had a legal deposit library. So I was able to access all the stuff there. So now to have all these materials available is incredible. And I can see actually we're doing a periodicals project now, and I think they're working with some of the periodicals that I used in paper form back then, which never would have existed. So Google Books was hardly a thing. Internet Archive wasn't a thing. So
yeah, right. Becky, how about you?
Yeah. In olden times when I was at university, it was trying to get primary sources. It was expensive, it was time consuming, it was exclusionary, it required mobility and money to access the archives. I remember trying to arrange train tickets that I could afford to get down to National Archives in London, and taking the train at about 5:30 in the morning because it was the only one that I could afford. It was not great. And digitization, thank goodness, it's making historical research more accessible, and it's enabling researchers to participate more easily in much broader histories, especially global histories. You're not limited by the resources of one institution that's close to where you live. You can explore archives from all around the world, and I think that's really great. It is really a far cry from heading into the archives first thing on the earliest train and standing there with a digital camera and digitizing it all yourself anyway, because you didn't have time to go to actually engage with the material in the archives. You just had to get as much as you could on that one visit. Thank goodness digitization is making it all so much more accessible. And I think that one of the big improvements that comes with digitization is the fact that it's made research possible from our own homes. This has been really essential over the pandemic with so many lockdowns. It means that we're able to conduct good academically meaningful research without having to access those archives, which is really valuable. It also means that we're able to just really idly explore collections from the comfort of your own home and allow research questions to just emerge from the things that you're exploring. Also, it's really valuable for quickly and very effectively and confidently building research proposals where previously perhaps you wanted to develop a new project, it would require several trips down to an archive. Now we're able to do it much more quickly and effectively from home.
Right. Excellent. So Felix, anything new going on at Adam Matthew with respect to digital access or platform technology that you're able to share?
Sure. So Adam Matthew is always trying to look at the technologies that are coming up and integrate them into the collections of primary sources which we publish. So, as I was saying, for many years we've been doing, OCR and optical character recognition, and we were one of the first to do handwritten technology recognition, handwritten text recognition technology. So that's something which is improving at the moment with our platform. So they, helping to make the manuscript materials more accessible, but notwithstanding the caveats we were talking earlier about, searches being too good. And then the other thing I mentioned was, yes, the platform on which we're publishing the material, Cortex, is available for libraries and archives to have a look at, and it's integrated with things like the OCR or the handwritten text recognition as well. So people can publish their own collections open access on that. And, alongside that, it will, if you're publishing video, it will generate the transcripts as well. So we do try to keep up with the technologies that can help you exploit this primary source and archival material.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. So Becky and Felix, that's all we have time for. Thank you to you both for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
You just heard from Dr. Rebecca Kreitz, a research fellow at the Center for the History of Medicine at the University of Warwick in the UK, and Felix Barnes, an editor at Adam Matthew Digital. This episode is brought to you in part by Adam Matthew Digital. If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.